Hi, and welcome to a quick demo of RESTpoint where we're going to build an example API project. So let's get going here. Let's do the pet store example that OpenAPI typically does. So we'll call this a pet store example. So I'm going to create a project, and a project is like anything. It's kind of a set of APIs and what that you'll save and kind of represents a work effort. So we're going to start with pets. And with pets, I want to be able to add pets. I'm going to have a collection of pets, so I'm going to be able to get them. I want to get them by an ID. I want to be able to change them, and I think I want to get rid of one. So let's start with that, and I'm going to save this, and there's our first path. And when you expand the path, you see there's all the actions. So like most mocking tools, I can now come in and take a look at, all right, if I'm going to run this get pets, what gets response? So let's put in a little example here, and we'll say name Roger and tag rabbit. So I'm going to save this and close, and then let's give this a little test run. Now this is all online, so this is now instantly able to run. So I'm going to grab this, and then I'm going to put it over here. And I'm going to use Hopscotch as my example to run these tests, which is a nice online example. So you'll see there's our URL. We paste it, and we do a get. And look, there's our response that we hard-coded in. But one of the tedious tasks of doing this stuff is now having to go to put in all these responses. And, of course, they're hard-coded. So a post really isn't post. It's a hard-coded response. So this is where this tool kind of changes it. So we're not going to go in and hard code this stuff. We're going to now turn it into a real dynamic website that's sitting on a database. So let's come in here, and I'm going to create a resource. And I'm going to call that a pet. And then say pet at the store. And I'm going to add in here a name and a tag. And I'm going to create the resource. And you see there's now our resource, and we can modify it and change things later so you're not hooked to this. But let's come into our path, and you'll see there's now all our actions. When I come in here now and assign this to be a pet, this will assign pet as the resource for all these actions. And if I come in here and take a look at this now, you'll see, oops, not here. You'll see there's the component in the pet, whereas before we had hard-coded JSON. So let's close this. Now let's go run our request again. And you'll see it now is returning this ID, name, and tag. So what happens there is anytime we create a path, we create one instance of it in the database. So if we come down here and look at our database collection for pets, you'll see we have one here. So let's edit this to say Roger rabbit, and I'm going to save this in the data collection or database, whatever term you like. And now when I come here and do a get, you'll see we now have Roger rabbit. Now to show you this is a real working API, let's go in and start doing some requests. So I'm going to call this JSON, and I'm going to do a post, and you can set the ID if you want or not. If you don't set one, we'll automatically generate one for you. And we have a Roger rabbit. Let's call it a Peter rabbit. So I'm now going to call this a post on the pets, and you'll see that gets response. We have a 201 create it. Now let's grab them all, pets. And you'll see there's all our pets. And I can do a put and a delete. You know, if I just put in the ID, you'll see there it fetches the pet. So this is a real working prototype, and not hard coded. This is all dynamic, completely data generated, like a real API would be. And at this point now, at any time you can come in and generate OpenAPI. We have version 2 and version 3. And if you want to tweak that OpenAPI, you can by just coming into documents and modifying it. You see there's all the documents, so you could come in and modify the script to see how you would like it if you want it different. Now what you'll see here is that this is for test driving, and we can do some other things like copying. So now that we have this working, then you might say, okay, well, let's do something a little more complicated than just a one-level API and a single resource with a couple of properties. So let's do a couple of things to make this a little more advanced. So now let's say I want to have stores, and I'm going to use the OpenAPI convention of an ID, and I'm going to call it pets. I think we lost our I there. So for a store, I want to be able to add a pet to a store, get it. I want to be able to change it. I want to be able to delete it. And where's my get? Right here. Okay, so I'm going to hit save. And now we have, I'm going to close pets for now because we were working with that. So now you see, okay, great. I now have this, stores and pets. So let's go to our hopscotch now and put that in. So I'm going to say, because we have nothing in our database right now for this, I'm going to say stores 1 pets. And let's add Peter Rabbit into store number 1. So I'm going to do a post. So post store 1, let's add in this pet, Peter Rabbit. So I'll do a post. And then you say, oh, it's empty. I see it worked and it's created, but we just remembered if we come over to our post, it's empty. So instead of having to go hard code everything now, let's just set our resource to pet. And then I'm going to save. Now let's go back, and this time we're going to do, well, we can do a quick get on this to show that the last post worked. And you'll see there it is. So for store pet too, and then for store pet, we can add it in a store. If we were to do a post now, post that, and you remember that was an ID 1 and that was Roger Rabbit. And we're going to do a post of ID 1 into there. And you'll see there. So now if we do a get on store 2, you'll see there is Roger Rabbit. Okay. So you see now how you can now have a little more advanced collections. Let's come into our resource and say, all right, well, right now we have pet, but a lot of our objects have more properties in them that are more advanced. So let's do that. Let's pretend we needed an address maybe of where the pet came from. So I'm going to come in here and create a property component. And a property component is address. And I'm going to use the form builder again. And I'm going to call it street. What's in an address? Street and city and zip. And we're kind of doing this kind of quickly. Okay, so we now have address. So now I'm going to come into pet and say, let's add address. And there, we'll click on this and say the type is a property component, and that's an address. So I'm going to click OK and update. So when you change, you'll see in the database that this is all now updated. So if I come in and take a look at pets, oops, I wanted to see data collections. You'll see in our pets, address, see the way they're all empty. So let's use our API to even update them. I could do it right now in the database, or let's do this. So if I say give me the pets, you'll see, okay, for Peter Roger Rabbit, doesn't have any information. So let's do an example here. I'm just going to grab this to make it easier than typing. We don't need the ID here. You can remove it. I'll just keep it in for now. It'll be ignored. 10 Main Street. And then I'm going to put in Los Angeles. I'll put in 90210. So, and let's change this to a put. And we know the ID is 1. So if I do a put, you'll see there's the information that was updated. Now if I do a get, there's the information. So you'll see how this now turns into a real API. And so you can really get a feel for how the API feels and give it to someone and say, what, how's this feel? And it's not just hard-coded responses. And I'll give you a quick example of how you can go a little bit even further by using something here called script. This is where you can put in some logic. And we'll just touch on it here in the demo. So let's say we set in a pet. If I come in here and I say a name has to be specified. It's mandatory. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to insert it. And there's lots of different examples here, but this uses something called Velocity, Apache Velocity script that you can put your logic into here. So we're going to say if there's the request object is your request body. And we're going to say if there's no pet name, then return an error. Don't allow the post to happen. So I'm going to update that logic. And then I'm going to come to Hopscotch. And now let's do the same. Let's do a post. And we're going to put it into pets. And we're going to call it George Rabbit. But I take that back. We're not going to put a name in because we want this to show an error. Because on the post, we said run this validation first. So think of this as, anytime you're running an action, you on the back end, you're allowed to inject some logic, and this we're going to do some validation. So when I do a post, you'll see the pet name must be specified. So what you see there is you can start getting really advanced, depending on what your need is for the API, to really try to flesh out the needs and get people really feeling like it's a real API. And webhooks is where you can come in, create this, and let's say we wanted to update a Slack news group, for example. You just put in the post, the header, and now whenever the Slack URL, whenever something happens, you can have that run. So if we call this the Slack URL, like HTTPS Slack, and it has slack.com, and we know it's a big long URL, and the post body is typically text, right? And we would call this maybe the request body, because we just want the name to be sent in the Slack. We would do that, and now we would grab that, and if we went into pets, we'd say, this is before it interacts with the database. Afterwards, we know it all worked. We would say now update our logic to send that post to Slack. Now we don't have that working, so we'll just remove that for now. So you can really get really advanced prototypes working. And now let's say that you have this at a point where you want to send it out for review. You can come in here and make a version of it, create the version, and everything is copied over so that now you can send this out for people to review, and then you can go off and go back to designing your API, and it's not affected because it locks this version in, and now people interact with that. And then all you do is grab, let's say, the full access URL API. If you want to allow them to add and remove objects in the API, you'd give them that. If you only want read only, if you don't want them to delete, give them this one. And shared means that anytime you go to defined APIs, if you're looking for that, you can go to REST point and say, that's my email address. You see there's our websites, and you'll see there's the APIs and the keys. So this is a way to share it so that it's easy to tell it to somebody, because you just have to say, hey, go to find APIs and type in the email address, and you'll see all the APIs that they're offering to show, along with API keys. And the API keys are nice because they allow you to limit them. If you don't want them to delete data, they can't delete it. If you want to give them full access, sure. And there's the paths, so you can select which paths that they want. So we went through a lot of different concepts here, but the whole idea is kind of just to give a next generation mocking tool, and this is more of a prototyping tool because it's really sitting on a database and it's all done for you. You don't have to do anything, and it's a way to really prototype an API so that when you go and build it, it's right, feels good the first time, and you don't have to do a lot of rework. Thank you.